All right, everyone. So 2020's presidential election is very overshadowing in the world of politics. People don't realize that 35 Senate seats are also up for grab, and I'm going to try to predict which way those Senate seats will go about 10 or so months away from Election Day in 2020. So we can start off first with the states that are safe, that are going to go to Democrats no matter what happens in the presidential race. Oregon, Dick Durbin's going to keep his seat in Illinois. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and that's honestly, in terms of safe blue states, I think that's about it. Now, keep in mind, Democrats are defending a lot less seats than Republicans, so they started out with 35 seats that are already theirs, as opposed to Republicans just 30. Republicans need to win more races, they need to keep more seats. So there's only 4 Democratic safe states up in 2020. We can go to Republican safe states: Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the states that are normally safe in presidential elections, for the most part, unless something crazy happens, are going to be safe as well. We're going to leave Mitch McConnell's seat for another category. But I think overall, Lindsey Graham, he's not really as popular, but I think his more pro-Trump stances over the past few months are really going to help him carry South Carolina by a safe margin, as Trump did in 2016. All right, so that's going to be it for Republican safe states. Now we're going to go on to Democratic likely states. So states that the Democrats are going to carry by a likely margin. New Mexico, I think, is going to be carried by a likely margin. Possibly safe, but for the time being, I'm going to put it as likely. If we look at 2014, the last time this Senate seat was up for grabs, incumbent Tom Udall won the seat by around 10 points. And I predict it'll be a similar margin given the fact that it is a presidential election. Also, this was a low turnout election for Democrats, yet the Democrats still won the seat by a likely margin. So I think in a presidential race, it'll be similar. In fact, you could argue it's going to be safe. But if Trump does actually visit New Mexico, at least a little bit, I think it'll give some momentum for whoever the Republican challenger is. Of course, it all depends on the challenger as well. If there's a strong challenger in New Mexico, maybe a younger, dynamic Republican or something, then it could flip. But for now, I'm going to put this as likely Democrat. Another likely Democratic state is going to be Virginia. Again, regardless of how the presidential election goes, all the statewide offices in Virginia are Democratic, all the senators are Democratic, and a majority of the House delegation is Democrat as well. If we look at 2014, incumbent Senator Mark Warner won this seat by just a point. This was high turnout for Republicans in 2014, almost like a repeat of 2010, but for the Senate, they took a ton of Senate seats this time around. But despite all this, Ed Gillespie couldn't edge out Warner, and even though he did really good in Northern Virginia for a Republican, he got over 40% in Fairfax County, and we'll look in a minute. Trump's results from Northern Virginia were, quite frankly, abysmal compared to Republicans in previous years. I believe Romney got similar margins in counties like Prince William and Loudoun. Of course, Romney didn't win Loudoun County, but Warner actually did win Loudoun County. And as we're going to see in a minute, these results for Donald Trump are much different. So this is during a low turnout election, right? The election is pretty close. Republicans are energized. There's a Democratic president currently. And in these high, dense, populated areas, these cities, the turnout is lower. The Democrats still carry these areas, but Republicans tend to be older. They vote more. So these areas are more Republican than they're going to be in a general election. If we look at 2016 real quick, for Virginia, we can see that Trump in Northern Virginia did abysmally. Trump only got 28% of the vote in Fairfax County. Hillary got 64 and 355,000 votes. If we look at the turnout as compared to 2014, it seems to be about half. The turnout. Republican turnout is almost the same, yet because Democratic turnout is so much lower, they break 40% in Fairfax County, something they're not going to do in 2020. So I definitely think that, like in 2016, how Hillary won this by a lean margin. She won Virginia by a lean margin, between 2 to 7 points, which is what I consider lean. I think that the Democratic senator as well, Mark Warner, is going to do that. We can look at Prince William. Like, these results for Trump are not good in Northern Virginia. However, his rural Virginia results are outstanding. He needs to get more turnout in these areas. And I think if he did focus rallies on Virginia, it would get better. However, I wouldn't put most of my money in Virginia. If I was Trump, I'd be going for the Rust Belt. But anyway, that's it for Virginia. That's going to be likely blue. Another likely blue state is going to be New Hampshire. Jeanne Shaheen is a fairly popular senator from New Hampshire, and regardless of which way New Hampshire goes, now I think New Hampshire is going to go for Donald Trump. I still think Jeanne Shaheen is going to win this state by a fairly large margin because she is very popular in the state. If we go back to 2014, again, during a high turnout year for Republicans, Jeanne Shaheen edged out Scott Brown by a few points. She got 51% of the vote. I think she'll do even better this time around, and it's a higher turnout election. Maybe putting it as likely this early is a stretch, but the way polls are looking, she has a pretty solid lead on this state. So for now, I'm going to keep it as likely Democrat. So anyway, that's going to be it all for the likely Democratic. We're going to move on to the likely states now. The first likely state we're going to go is Alaska. Now, Alaska is safe on the presidential level, but back in 2014, the Senate race with Dan Sullivan and his Democratic opponent, they don't have the county results there, but his Democratic opponent were very close. So just for the sake of it, I'm going to put it by a likely margin, even though you could basically guarantee it's going to stay in Republican hands unless the Democrats have a huge challenger. But Alaska is still a very conservative state, so I'm going to put it as likely. Another likely Republican state for the Senate is going to be Texas. John Cornyn is less known, but also less controversial in Texas than Ted Cruz. And if we look at his 2014 margin of victory, it is absolutely insane. He crushed his opponent by, nearly 30 points. That is a huge lead. And this is what we'd expect from Texas, say, a few years ago. But sadly, the bluing of Texas, especially in the suburbs, Cornyn's support in the suburbs is insanely high. Keep in mind, though, this is a very low turnout election, high turnout for Republicans. Cornyn wins Harris County by almost 10 points. Actually, over 10 points. He wins Harris County by 12 points. Fort Bend County by a safe margin. He's winning suburban counties, Fort Worth by a huge margin. Now, let's look at how Trump did, and this will kind of give us an idea of what turnout and how people are going to vote like in a high turnout election like 2020 is going to be. You can see Harris County. Trump lost Harris County by almost a safe margin. It was almost safe Democrat. Fort Bend County, he lost by a lean margin. These are all counties, by the way, that John Cornyn carried the last time around, but since it's going to be a high turnout election, he can't count on Democrats staying home in 2020, especially since, all they want to do is get Trump out of office, so they're going to vote down ballot Democrat. Also, these suburbs as well, I think, are going to stay. They might be a little redder than they were for Trump, but overall, they're going to be bluer, probably, in the future. I mean, if we look at the last Senate race, which was a high Democratic turnout, these counties were very close to flipping blue. That's how close they got, and the Democrats broke 40 in both Denton and Collin County. Fort Worth also went for blue for Beto O'Rourke, but in terms of a race with high turnout overall among Republicans and Democrats, I think overall that Fort Worth County is going to go to John Cornyn by a little bit more than it goes for Donald Trump. Same with these other counties. I think overall John Cornyn's going to do better in the state of Texas than Donald Trump based on the fact that he is indeed an incumbent and also on the fact that he's less controversial than Trump. And Texans still, for some reason, tend to like more of the neocon, George Bush type Republicans. So that's my justification for making Texas a likely state and not a safe state. Another likely state is going to be David Perdue's seat in Georgia. If we look at how David Perdue did last time in 2014, he beat his Democratic opponent by a fair amount, around 8 points, although, not ideal for a Republican. Again, this was a high Republican turnout election. However, Michelle Nunn, I'm assuming, she ran on a more moderate platform than the Democrats are running in 2020, so I think in Georgia that appealed to more voters. It stands out. You can look at these counties, Gwinnett and Cobb County. These are two counties that are in the Georgia metropolitan area. And if we look at 2016, these are counties that Trump lost. Trump lost these counties in 2016. He lost Gwinnett by around 6 points. He lost Cobb County by about 2 points. So if you're going to win back any of these counties, I think Donald Trump could win Cobb County in 2020. The Republicans lost Cobb County in 2018. Stacey Abrams won it by a higher margin than this, obviously. But I think in a high turnout election, again, with Republicans and Democrats turning out, I think Cobb County is going to flip. Gwinnett County is going to be a harder county to flip since it went for Clinton by a much higher margin. But these other counties here in the Atlanta exurban area that still have a fair amount of population are very solidly in the Republican column. I assume that probably has to do with the demographics of Georgia and these counties. So that's my justification for making this a likely Republican state. So that's going to be all for likely Republican states. We're going to move on to lean Democrat states. So the first lean Democratic state we're going to go for is Colorado. Now, ultimately, Cory Gardner is a very unpopular incumbent. He is a Republican, but I ultimately think that I don't see Trump carrying Colorado in 2020 as of right now, and because of that, I don't see Cory Gardner keeping his seat. I think that too many voters in Colorado are going to associate him with Trump, and that's good for Republicans. That's going to increase Republican turnout because he's gotten better. He used to be a staunch never Trumper, and then he became very friendly with the president. I think ultimately that's going to help him among Republicans, but among the general voting population, I think it's ultimately going to hurt him in Colorado, a state that is increasingly getting more blue. Democrats have control of every other statewide office and control of the state legislature. So ultimately, I think it's going to go by a likely blue margin. Another state that I think is going to go, on a side note, I completely forgot to make New Jersey and Delaware safe blue states. I think I was going to make them safe or likely, but I'm going to make them safe just for the sake of this because I completely forgot about these two states. But anyway, that's not important. Other lean Democratic states I see are Minnesota. Ultimately, I think even if Trump carries Minnesota, which I did not put in my prediction, but let's just say for the sake that the Democrats run a more radical opponent to Donald Trump. Tina Smith, despite being less popular than Amy Klobuchar won in a landslide in 2018. And Tina Smith in the special election only won by around 10 points. I think ultimately a presidential race, it's going to be a lot closer, but I think with incumbent advantage, and she's not a very controversial senator, and ultimately not really well known. I think that it's going to stay in the lean Democratic column. I don't think Republicans are going to flip this seat this time around. Although Minnesota as a whole is trending red, so eventually that'll probably change in the future, but for now, we're going to put it as a lean blue. And a state that we're going to start doing lean red now. A race I'm going to put as lean red is Georgia's second Senate seat. There's a special election because Senator Isaacson has announced he's not running for re-election, and David Perdue's seat was already up this year, so they're going to have two Senate races in Georgia, something that doesn't really happen. We saw that in Minnesota in 2018. I'm going to put this as a lean because the Brian Kemp appointee, Kelly Loeffler, I think her name is, she's not really well known. And she's just going to be a standard Republican, I assume. So most voters are not going to know her. So anybody who votes down ballot or votes for Trump will probably get her. So she's going to win by a smaller margin, I just think, because she's way less known. And also more Democrats are piling onto the field to try and challenge her. So I'm going to put that as lean. Again, if we look at Georgia, once again, the last time there was a Georgia Senate race was in 2016. So we can get a hand of... we can get an idea of what the turnout's going to be. David Isaacson won his seat by a much wider margin than David Perdue did back in 2014. Yet, since this is an open seat, it's seen as more vulnerable. If we look at the suburbs, he was able to win over Gwinnett County, a county that Trump lost. He won this county by 5 points. In comparison, Donald Trump lost it, I think, by around 6. He also won Cobb County by a lean margin, which is very good. So he did very good in suburban Georgia. He was able to hold on to suburban Atlanta, and ultimately that gave him a very comfortable lead. He was also almost able to win Chatham County, which is where Savannah, Georgia is. This county has been... Trump, I think, lost this county by 14 points. He was almost able to win this, so he was a type of candidate that could get a lot of Georgians behind him. The problem is he's not running anymore, and a lot of Democrats... Thankfully, Stacey Abrams is not running for the seat, or else I would have put it in the tilt category, but I think ultimately she still would have lost with the higher turnout. So anyway, another lean Republican state is going to be Mitch McConnell's seat. Mitch McConnell is not popular at all, but ultimately he's going to hold on to his seat based on the fact that he has a lot of money backing him. And I think Trump's going to do a lot of work for him, but right now, based solely on the fact that he's super unpopular, I think his favorability rating is 20-something%. I'm going to put it as a lean state for now. Again, I'm going to probably change this. I don't see it flipping, though, under no circumstances, really. I just think in a 2020 race, if down ballot Republicans are going to be voting for Trump, they're going to vote for Mitch McConnell as well. So in the spirit of doing more lean states, we're going to have North Carolina. People have this as a complete toss-up. I see North Carolina as lean, and the reason I do is because the last time we had a North Carolina Senate race, during a presidential election year, the Republican was able to win by 6 points. Now, do I think Tom Tillis is going to win by 6 points? No, I think he's going to win by around 2 or 3, just like Trump did the state. Again, Tom Tillis being very unpopular um, among North Carolina voters. However, Trump is doing well in the polls there, and he's ultimately most likely going to carry the state of North Carolina. Again, regardless of who the Democratic nominee is, even if it's Joe Biden, who does better in the South. People say Sanders does. Sanders actually does not do well in the South. The only southern state he does well is Texas against Trump. He does better than the others. But overall, in the Deep South, he does not do too well. So I'm going to put this is why I'm going to put North Carolina's Senate seat ultimately in the lean category. Another seat I'm going to put as lean is the seat of Senator Ernst in Iowa. She's not very popular, and I think solely on the fact that I believe Trump will carry Iowa again by a likely margin is the fact that she's is my justification for saying that she's going to carry the state in 2020. So overall, I think she's going to carry this state by around 4 or 5 points. Trump's going to carry it by a larger margin. Susan Collins of Maine is another person I'm going to put this as a lean Republican state. Again, we could just look at 2014, high Republican turnout, and a lot of Democrats voted for her too. Almost 70% of the vote went to Susan Collins, the moderate Republican. However, her reputation is being a little bit tainted among Maine's Democrats based on her votes to confirm Kavanaugh and not to convict President Trump. So ultimately, I'm going to put Maine as a lean GOP state. Now, we only have 2 states left. We have Michigan and Arizona. Now, people are saying, oh, Michigan would probably be blue. But now the challenger running in Michigan is a man by the name of John James. He ran back in 2018 against Debbie Stabenow, again, during a high Democratic turnout election, and almost won. He came way closer to winning than anyone thought he did. He lost by around 7 points. And if Trump carries Michigan, there's a very good chance that John James will take this Senate seat as well. He did fairly. The only place he really lost this state were, of course, in the Detroit suburbs and areas like Grand Rapids, and he didn't get enough rural support. I guess Debbie Stabenow's name recognition, as well as the higher Democratic turnout, made it so that John James wasn't as good in these rural areas. But if we look at 2016, however, in Michigan, I ultimately predicted that Michigan would go for President Trump again in 2016. I mean, if any state's going to flip that, he's going to lose. If he's going to lose ground, he's going to lose it here in Michigan. But Grand Rapids was a state John James barely lost, and it's a state a county that Trump barely won. So ultimately, Virginia's going to be very close. But if John James can muster up these kind of margins in rural Michigan, I don't see it being. I could see him winning the state, but based on the fact that the current holder of this seat is a Democrat, I'm going to put it as lean, tilts Democrat, just for right now, just for the sake of this video. And now finally, we're going to move on to Arizona. Arizona, unfortunately for you Republicans, I think it does not look good for Martha McSally. She's not popular in the state, and every poll that I've ever seen between Martha McSally and Mark Kelly, it has Kelly up by around 3 or 4 points on average. So just for the sake of this video, right now, I'm going to put this as tilt Democrat. Again, regardless of how the Senate race goes, I can see that Trump could carry Arizona, and I think he will carry Arizona again in 2020. However, even if he does, I don't know if it's going to be enough to bring Martha McSally up, because in the 2018 Senate race, and we can take a look at this here, we go to the Arizona results. In the 2018 Senate race, it was close, but she lost by a lean margin. She lost by around 3 points. And Maricopa County is where all the votes in Arizona are, essentially. This is the most important county. If Trump can win Maricopa County and take Martha McSally over the finish line, she'll win this state. But for right now, I don't really see it happening, just based on the polling data. Again, I'll probably make another video updating this as we get closer to the 2020 election, maybe in a few months or so. But anyway, the next video I'm probably going to make is a prediction on how the governor's races will go. Hopefully I'll have these videos released on the same day so you can watch both of those, one after the other. But anyway, that's all for today. This is my Senate prediction: 52 for the Republicans, 48. I think the Republicans will lose one seat, but ultimately I think they'll hold their own, and hopefully gain some more seats in 2022. However, again, depending on how President Trump's job performance is, that's going to be a factor that we're going to have to take into account. Anyway, guys, that's all for today. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.